Overthinkers, what was your most satisfying "told you so" moment? My boyfriend, who has zero history of seizures, narrowly escaped dying from one because my overthinking led me to break into his house when he didn't answer the phone. My overthinking had begun a few nights prior. He mentioned that he bit his tongue in his sleep and woke up with a bloody pillow and sore mouth, but he had no memory of it happening. That, for some reason, led my overthinking brain to question, wow, did he have a seizure and just not realize it? He has zero history of seizures, and we'd been together multiple years. Didn't live together but spent nights together. And I had never seen a hint of a seizure. But for some reason, this stuck in my mind. Fast forward 2 days. We usually don't hang out in the morning because he likes to sleep in late. But on this day, we had an appointment to go and see a specific dog at the shelter that I was thinking of adopting. He wouldn't answer the phone that morning. I called multiple times before I went to his place, but he never picked up. I started getting a bad feeling, but I quelled the "he's having a seizure" thought because that was so clearly unlikely, and meanwhile I was making an action plan for that very scenario. I got to his house and he wouldn't answer, so in a completely not me crazy girlfriend move, I climbed over his fence. Luckily, his door was unlocked. I found him unconscious and unresponsive, lying on his back with the sticky remnants of foam all around his mouth. I jumped into action. I rolled him on his side to help curb aspiration, put a pillow under his shoulder to keep him in that position, and called the ambulance. Had I not hopped the fence to get in? Had I not driven over when he didn't pick up the phone? Had we not had plans to meet up hours earlier than we usually did? He would have been dead by lunch. His kidneys were already shutting down by the time we reached the ER. If he had never mentioned biting his tongue in his sleep, I don't think I would have been overthinking at all. No crazy worries about seizures would have pushed me to go over the edge and find him. Turns out to be a weird brain disease that's bizarrely endemic to New Mexico. Kind of cerebral cavernous malformations. Several days later, after we got home from the hospital, I got a call from a friend who said the dog, against all odds, was still at the shelter, as in the very dog we were supposed to be seeing that day. I'd given up hope on getting her and pushed it out of my priorities while my boyfriend was hospitalized, but they'd forgotten to take down my 24-hour hold sign on her cage, so no one inquired about her. She's now our miracle dog and is the sweetest animal I've ever owned. My boyfriend wouldn't be alive today if we hadn't made an appointment to meet her. Is this going to be that category of video that turns us all into paranoid weirdos? Because if there are more stories like this, my head is going to be on a fricking swivel and interpreting any physical irregularities in my friends as grave medical conditions. I always carry a small sewing kit whenever I go to a wedding. I've sewed 2 brides into their dresses so far. I worked weddings for a while, during an age, 26 to 28, where a lot of my friends were getting married. I've helped to bustle pretty much every bride whose wedding I attended, including brides who I didn't know very well, who were either friends of my husband or were getting married to a groom that I was close friends with. At work, I had one of those craft supply organizers full to the brim of emergency supplies, pins, safety bobby and straight pins, hair ties, earring backs, a sewing kit, pain relievers, Tums, and granola bars. Sometimes you just need to get the bride to eat something. Chalk works great for covering up minor stains on white dresses, hairspray, makeup remover wipes, superglue, band-aids, blister bandages, you name it. People were always pleasantly surprised when they needed something random, and I was just like, yep, I've got that, here you go. All the teachers at the middle school I taught at knew that I was a pack rat, and one day a kid split his pants, and the school counselor came to me and said, "Mr. Smith, would you happen to have a pair of sweats or gym pants in your truck?" Yep. So the kid spent the rest of the day in a pair of nylon pants I had behind my seat. He's lucky, because if he didn't fit, he would have spent the rest of the day in a white disposable coverall in case I had car trouble in nice clothes. The icing on the cake, it was a student I really liked who was super helpful to other kids and teachers, so it was nice to do something nice for him. I also carried a Swiss Army brand soft-side briefcase stuffed with a few of each size of every battery. One day, Phil Niekro and 2 Braves players were there for an assembly and Phil's mic battery was dying, so I sprinted upstairs to my classroom, grabbed a 9-volt from my bag, and then basically rolled across the panel and switched out his battery and got back to the PA, avoiding getting on TV news cameras. I was at one of those trampoline parks with my kid when I looked over and saw several of the workers attending to an elderly lady sitting on the floor. It turns out she'd taken a shot to the forehead somehow and was bleeding profusely. They were trying to help with paper towels. Well, I'd taken a free local Stop the Bleed class, just in case, and I've since kept supplies in my truck. I asked if they needed some gauze and a bandage and went and got it and brought it back. I told the guy, now, if one piece of gauze fills up, and he interrupted, take it off and put on a new one. And I said, no, you put another one over top that one but leave the bottom one there. And he said, well, you know more than I do. Come over and help. And we were able to get her patched up. If anyone else wants to take a 90-minute Stop the Bleed class, they're free and likely in your local area. Stay safe out there, guys. I didn't actually plan for this, it just worked out. But one day, for some reason, I put a suction cup in my pocket. I don't exactly remember why, it was from a shower hook that I think I broke, and I put it in my pocket hoping to find a replacement or something else. Later that day, I was standing around with a few friends, and one friend was lamenting that his bumper was dented. He showed us and said, I bet I could pop it right out if I had like a suction cup or something. I wordlessly pulled the suction cup out of my pocket and handed it to him. Everyone definitely thought I was creepy as heck. Not me, but my mother. Apparently at a party where my parents and their friends were playing board games, there was a realization that an hourglass was missing from one of the games they planned on playing. My mother proceeded to reach into her purse and pull out an hourglass she just so happened to bring, on the off chance they didn't have one. However, later in the night, when some drinks had been had, someone accidentally slammed a drink down, breaking my mother's hourglass. Without missing a beat, she reached into her purse and pulled out another hourglass. She knew the first one, being glass, might get broken, so she had a backup ready. Imagine how the guy who wanted to go home felt when he broke the hourglass and suddenly there was another one, especially after hitting the very first one. When my son was still a baby, we had to take an 11-hour flight. As an overthinker, I bought at least 25 diapers for him to go through. He didn't need that many. But the mum sitting close to us was very grateful when she ran out of diapers, not even halfway through the flight, and I gave her a few. Ah yes, the little brown fountains never let up below a certain age. I was kinda shaken when my friends told me how quickly they went through one big pack. New parents, you're truly living through your own version of the Blitz every day. It's just that what's raining down against you is more liquid. This was at 9 years old. We'd driven home and seen the beginning wisps of smoke for the California Cedar Fire in 2003. Naturally, I assumed the worst and packed up all of my clothes and spent about an hour making a travel cage for my guinea pigs. I tied their water bottle to the side so they could drink, packed up their food and their favorite furniture just in case. I then spent the next few hours monitoring the fire on the news and out in the distance from our window, periodically asking my parents if we needed to evacuate. At some point in the night, the fire sped up like crazy and was literally on the hillside across the street. I went into my parents' room and said, "The fire is across the street, are you sure we shouldn't evacuate?" At this point, we all went crazy grabbing important documents and supplies as we were about to lock the doors and drive, and then I realized I forgot my guinea pigs. My parents told me it was too late and I didn't have time to grab them, but when I cried and explained I had them packed up, I was able to grab them and go. The house ended up okay thanks to a neighbor putting out embers before they took, but we were gone for a long enough time that my pigs wouldn't have made it without feeding. In short, I helped save my family and pets from a fire because I was an anxious child. Jeez, you were a smart 9-year-old. When September 11th happened, my brother, who was 5 at the time, began packing a bag in case we had those kinds of people attack us. He packed the essentials like his teddy bears, a VHS copy of The Phantom Menace, his favorite toy cars, and a random book my dad was reading. He would have single-handedly saved Western civilization. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've never told anyone this, but when I was in middle school and going through puberty, I used to be terrified of popping a stiff one and my fly being down accidentally. Like, I would be up in front of the class and then randomly get solid and it would just pop out my fly, in front of the whole class. It's making me laugh just typing this out. You know that episode of South Park where Jimmy keeps getting randomly rigid? That was basically my life. Usually I would just tuck it in my waistband and wait for the storm to settle, but I still had a huge fear of it popping out my fly because I forgot to zip it up. So what did I do? I started wearing my boxers backwards, so that even if I forgot to zip up my fly, my eggplant wouldn't be exposed. It was a pain to use the urinals, but honestly, I got used to it pretty quickly. Flash forward a couple of months and I was at the movies with a big gathering of people. It was basically a big group of girls and my group of guy friends. Each guy and girl were paired up and made sure to sit next to each other. I was paired with a girl I had a huge crush on. We shared a popcorn and soda and it was a huge moment for me. Briefly into the movie, I got one of those damn random rock-hard Richards and I quickly but discreetly stood up and did the old waistband tuck. Then I sat back down and I could feel it pop out through my zipper. Thankfully, my backwards boxers kept it from saying hello to my date, but I still panicked and had to cover it up in a hurry. She noticed, I think, but we can all agree that a 6th grade boy's upright Johnson hiding under a layer of underwear is better than just sprouting out bare in the middle of a crowded movie theater. Also, she never said anything to her friends about it. Shout out to Stephanie for not mocking me with her friends. Went through a stage as a teenager where I thought I was psychic. I know, stupid. A friend asked me jokingly to make a prediction. I told him to get a flashlight because tomorrow would be dark. I grabbed one myself when I got home and put it in my purse. No idea why, just did it. The next day, the Eastern Seaboard blackouts happened. He still asks for predictions to this day. I was supposed to get married at the end of May last year. At the beginning of the year, before any of the pandemic stuff happened, I became obsessed with thinking about all the things that could go wrong and how we'd lose our money spent on the event. As a result, I purchased a very high coverage insurance policy for the event. As luck would have it, this kind of insurance had no clause that prevented collecting if there was a pandemic. We got all of our money back. I'm also a germaphobe, so I already stockpiled masks, gloves, Lysol wipes, and hand sanitizer. In college, on occasion, upperclassmen would randomly steal the underclassmen's towels from the shower stalls and then lock their room doors, so they had to go to the RA undressed. I had the idea to stash a towel in the drop-ceiling tiles for just that event. Maybe a week later, I became the victim of a towel snatching. However, the upperclassmen were very unhappy to see me strut out with a nice clean towel from my ceiling stash. That is such a specific thing to be paranoid about and prepared for, but what do I know, I guess, because you were able to actively save yourself from some embarrassment. They either thought that you were a fricking magician or that you carried 2 towels into the shower. I carry a fire extinguisher in my automobile. I witnessed a car accident where the engine caught fire. I quickly put it out before it burned the inside of the car. Everyone survived. I always keep an unopened deck of cards in my backpack. You can never tell when some hold'em may be needed to pass the time. But when I was at a business conference, the bigwig who was presenting to us was having to wing it with a few things because his luggage had been lost, and he didn't have all of his materials. He had the PowerPoint deck, but he didn't have his props. He started going into explaining how he'd be able to demonstrate his statistical principle he was describing, only he didn't have the unopened deck of cards he needed. Voila! I was able to produce a shrink-wrapped deck of cards. My boss was also in the same presentation, and he was also impressed that I just happened to have a deck of cards on me, so that's nice too. I found a nickel-sized lump on my 15-month-old daughter's temple. I freaked out, obsessed over it, researched it exhaustively, and concluded that it was a dermoid cyst that had worn through the skull. I was told by a pediatrician that it was a bone bruise that would fix itself over the course of 3 to 6 months. No imaging was needed, and I shouldn't make an appointment at the children's hospital because it would resolve on its own. I got an X-ray done anyway, and the radiologist confirmed every one of my suspicions, but the pediatrician still said to wait and see because that's what you do with dermoid cysts, and it was definitely not through the skull despite what the radiologist said. Made an appointment at the hospital anyway, and the surgeon swore up and down that although it was a dermoid cyst as I'd suspected, it would not be through the skull, since in all of his years of practice it never had been. Well, guess what? It was through the skull, and it was pressing on the membrane between the skull and the brain, a hair's breadth from breaking the membrane or pressing on the brain. A couple more weeks of waiting, and my daughter would have had seizures, a brain infection, and lasting damage. I overthought it, and now she's a happy, healthy 3-year-old. I carry scissors in my glove compartment. They came in handy when a kid tightened a skinny zip tie around my 9-year-old daughter's finger at a park, completely cut off the circulation. Also, the other kid's mum was a nurse, so that was helpful too. Carry scissors and a nurse at all times. One time, I way overthought a concern I had around dryer vent fire. When the time came that we had a clog and didn't know, and there was a wee burst of flames, I was fricking ready. To add, I did clean the lint trap religiously. I just had a gut feeling. I bought one of those things from Amazon to clean it and nothing came out, so don't let that fool you. If your drying times are up and there's sometimes a smell, call someone or check out every possible location. We found basically Brillo pads of burnt hair inside the heating element. Stay safe, pals. I'm an amateur clarinetist. I've played in the local orchestra and the like. My son was in the high school band, he also plays clarinet. Prior to a football game at the warm-up area, he called me as I was about to head to the game, saying that someone in his section had a problem with their instrument. So did I have a loner? Now, the thing about being a clarinet player is that everyone you know calls you every time they see a cheap plastic clarinet for sale at a garage sale or the like. So over the years, especially when my son was in junior and senior high, when I saw one of those for $50 or $100, I grabbed it. Didn't happen every day, but at the peak of my collection, I had a couple of beta plastic clarinets in addition to the pretty good wooden one my son played. And Lord knows that I wouldn't trust anyone with my good clarinets in the brass band or the one that I used in the orchestra. So I grabbed both of my plastic ones, which actually played okay, and I brought them. I pulled the one I thought was the better of the two out of the car and gave it to my son's friend. Meanwhile, he says, "Hey, another person ran into a problem, and I got the second clarinet out of the car." "How many clarinets do you have?" was my son's question. It was a proud moment. Injuring my dominant hand. As a kid, I had an irrational fear of having it chopped off. I spent all of grade 6 teaching myself to write and do stuff with my left hand. I made a conscious effort to remain as ambidextrous as possible. As an adult, I broke a few fingers on my dominant hand, but it wasn't a big issue because I could still do most things equally with my left hand. Anticlimactic, but it was useful. I bought and learned to use a Slim Jim, which opened locked cars. I carry one in my car and I've been able to help no less than 10 people who've locked their keys in their car. My brother was visiting me from out of town and he needed something from Target. He called me and said an elderly man had locked his keys in his car and I was able to drive over and help. Also, I have jumper cables that have helped a few stranded drivers start their car. My goodness, I mean, good for you? But it's a little concerning that there's apparently a universally effective and commercially available product that can get cars open that easily. Does every carjacker know about it? Great to be prepared and have one in your garage, I guess, but don't go getting ideas, car thieves. Getting lost in a foreign country, relying on my phone's GPS to navigate, and the data stops working. I'd over-prepared and memorized the map of the downtown area ahead of time. I'm basically blind without my glasses, and I've always taken a backup pair of glasses when I travel. It went untouched for years, taking up valuable space in my luggage. Lo and behold, one trip to Montreal a few years ago, and I just woke up one morning to find my glasses broken. No idea how it happened. And I finally got the chance to break out my backup pair. When I was 11, I always kept approximately 12 to 15 of some combination of pens, pencils, and markers in my pant pocket. I just liked having options and never knew what I was going to need to write on. Sometimes I got side-eye from other kids though. Cut to, at a weekend camp with a bunch of kids. I'm participating in a sort of scavenger hunt race thing. At one point, our team hits this task where everyone has to draw or write something. I don't really remember. But there's only 2 pens, about 10 people per team, and another team just showed up. With 1 pen assigned to each team, it was going slowly until, you get a pen, you get a pen, everyone gets a pen. Our team screams through the task because we can all write simultaneously, while the other team's left plodding along with their 1 pen. We eventually win. Who's weird now? For those concerned about cheating, I do believe the lack of pens was oversight by the event planners, not a deliberate means of handicapping teams. There was a staff member monitoring that particular station and they didn't intervene. Our victory was sanctioned and still stands. Some other people have expressed concerns over the possibility of my getting impaled by all these writing utensils. Rest assured that this 100% has happened to me. I have absolutely impaled legs and fingertips multiple times. It's always terrible. Not me overthinking, but one time when my girlfriend and I were going to the gym, she packed me 2 spare shirts. I made a joke that it was unnecessary to bring 2, As it's not like I was going to explosively crap myself or something and ruin the spare shirt and need a second spare, we laughed it off, but she brought two anyway. After changing from my sweat-soaked shirt to a spare upon walking home, a bird craps all down me, ruining the shirt I was wearing. I was so thankful that she had brought an additional spare, so now I do not question the quantity of what she decides to bring anywhere. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.